Hi and welcome everybody. This is Roland Hartman from Graphic in Motion, and in this tutorial I want to show you how you can create these abstract shapes in Plexus. Let's take a quick look on what we are creating today. You see we have an abstract shape made with Plexus and they're animating on and moving and our camera is flying through. Actually, we are not going to make the whole promo you see here because this would be way too much work for one tutorial, but I want to focus especially on the creation of these 3D shapes that I created with Cinema 4D and Plexus. If you follow me along on YouTube or on VideoHive or Vimeo, you have probably already realized that this is actually one of my latest templates. It's called Plexus Abstract Opener. You can get it on my website, which is www.graphicinmotion.com. Of course, you can find all my other templates and some tutorials, some freebies, and yeah, everything I'm producing. And if you want to have the whole promo, you can purchase this through VideoHive, and I would be really glad if you support me like that, because then I will be able to continue producing tutorials and some free contents for you guys. So check that out. Now let's get started inside After Effects and yeah, create this abstract shape here. First of all, I want to create a new composition and I will make a 720p composition for now and call this my main comp. And I will make it 10 seconds long. That's good for now for our tutorial. And now I want to create a new layer and we'll take a solid for that and call it Plexus. To this layer I will apply the Plexus effect. And I just want to point out that this is not a basic Plexus tutorial, so I will not go through all the parameters and possibilities that you have with Plexus. I will just really only explain my workflow creating this promo. And yeah, if you are very new to Plexus, probably take a look whether you find a basic tutorial before you start following this one. So if you take a look now, I applied the Plexus effect to the layer and actually nothing is happening. We do not see anything because Plexus always needs to add some kind of geometry. And in my case, this will be an OBJ object, a 3D object. And to create this 3D object, we will use Cinema 4D. But don't worry if you do not have Cinema 4D or if you are not into 3D programs, then I will provide a download link to the OBJ file that I'm using in this tutorial in the video description. So take a look and move to my site and download the OBJ. You can skip the part in Cinema 4D and then we will be back in After Effects. In Cinema 4D, I will just create a simple layer or a plane, I should say. And I will change the size of this plane a little bit. First of all, I want it to be a little bit more wide. So I will increase the width to about 2600. And I will decrease the height to about 280 or 290, let's say 285. That's a very good value, I guess. And I want to turn on the garage shading because I want to see my polygons. And now I will try to get approximately squares here. So let's set the width segments to 20. And now we will reduce the height segments to something about, I don't know, let's see, 8. No, 8 is too much, like 6. 6 is not too bad. Let's increase these a little bit. Yeah, and this looks quite good. And why am I doing this? Because later on, if we import this piece into Plexus, every single point, every single vertex will be turned into a point in Plexus. So if we take a look now, okay, we don't see it because it's not an editable object, but I will show you this later on. So the next step that we want to do is to bend this plane. I know that there are several possibilities to do that, and maybe you will find a better one for you, but in my case, I just use a spline and the spline wrap effect. So let's do that. I will enter the front view by hitting or pressing F4. And now I will just zoom out a bit. So like that, so that I can see the whole plane here. And I will just take the normal Bezier spline creation tool, and I will start painting a simple shape, like so. And I just have in mind that on some point on this shape, I want to add my text. Like, let's create a shape like that. So this will be my shape here, and yeah, somewhere around here I will import my text in After Effects. So let's take a look whether the size is okay. I think the size of the spline is way too small right now. So I will just select the spline, and I will select all my points. And now let's try whether I can scale this up. It's pretty good. Just scale it up a bit more. Okay, now it's a little bit too big. I just want it to be approximately the size or the width of the layer, so something like that. I can reposition it a bit. Okay, let's say this is good. Now I will take the spline wrap effect and put it on my layer. And in the spline wrap effect, we apply our spline. So now let's go back to our perspective view to see what we have got. And you see now we have got our plane following the spline. And now I also want to add a little bit of twist to that. So let's enter, or let's select our spline wrap effect. And you see here we have the rotation option. And in this rotation option, I can set the banking now. So this is an overall banking. And I will set it to something like minus 25 degrees. And now I can also play around with these points here and add some twists. And maybe I want to add a little bit of twisting here. So let's say something interesting. Let's take a look how this looks. This is probably a little bit too much. I just want to have a little bit of twisting to create a little bit of a more interesting shape here. So let's say that I'm satisfied with that. Okay, this looks pretty good. And what we want to do now is we want to export this as an OBJ. And sometimes I had problems exporting the OBJ when it's not a convert or an editable object. So I recommend, I do not know whether it's really necessary, but I do this step just to make sure that everything is okay. So I select my plane, right click, and then I select current state to object. And now I have my plane, and you see now we have all the vertices, and all these vertices will be turned into points in Plexus later on. So with my plane here, I could now just delete all these or just group them together and hide them. Probably this is what I will do. I will do Alt-G, and then I will just edit this to my shape. Back up. And I will just hide this. And now I have got my plane, and I go to File, Export. And now you need this Plexus OBJ Export plugin or script. And if you do not have it already installed, I will also provide a download link in the video description. So take a look, download it, install it, and then you can export your Plexus OBJ sequence. As we speak about sequences, we do not need a sequence in this case because actually there is no animation going on. So what we want to do is make sure that our timeline is set to only 1 frame, the duration, because otherwise it will export exactly the frames that are written here. So let's set it from 0 to 1 frame, and that's good. And now we can select our export OBJ sequence. And I will quickly move to my tutorials folder. And export my bended shape here. So let's call it bend shape tort 01 and save it out. Okay, that's it for now. Now I could save the Cinema 4D scene. In my case, I really do not need it, so I will just close it. And in After Effects, I will go to the Plexus layer that I created before, and I will select Add Geometry. And in this Add Geometry, we will choose an OBJ. And now we choose the Import OBJ function and just open up our path where I saved my OBJ. And you see it created actually two files because we have, of course, frame number 0 and frame number 1. So it created a small sequence here, but I only do need one of them actually. So I just select the first one here and enter or press OK. And now I deselect file sequence because I do not want to import two files, only one. And immediately you see something is happening. So now our file is visible here, and you already can see the points that represent all the vertices on our 3D object. What we want to do now is to stylize this a little bit, and therefore I will just quickly add a background so that we can see this a little bit better. So let's create a new solid, call it BG for background, and let's just make it not quite white, but a little bit gray, so like that. And I will put this under my Plexus layer, and now I will go to my Plexus effect and change the color of the points. You see we have get scale from vertices, we don't need that, get color from vertices, we don't need that, and we do not want to get the opacity from vertices. We want to set this up on our own, and I will select some kind of a dark red here, same as I did in my promo. And for now I will set the points opacity to 100 that we can see what we're working with here. And now it's time to position this a little bit better. Actually, what I could do now is I could stylize my background so that I show you how I achieved the look that I used for this promo. And if we take a look here, actually I now closed it up, so I have to open it again. You see that I made some kind of abstract diffuse background here, and I will quickly show you how I did that. It's really easy. So let's select our BG layer and let's search for our, the effect is called 4-color gradient, and you want to put this on your BG. And you see standard settings are really horrible on this effect, but let's work with it. So let's take the one color and move it into the middle of the screen. And now let's make a really, really bright kind of orange color, like something like that. And I want to select the green color and turn it into some also quite bright bluish color. And down here we will take a little bit of a darker color, so something like maybe like that. And of course we can reposition that like so. And here we take the last color, we take a similar color than this one, but maybe we want to add a little bit more of saturation on this one. Okay, now let's just move them around a little bit more. I will just try to get something similar and not 100% the same. So I will blend these a little bit more together, like so. And this is approximately the look that I used. Not quite, because I added some kind of color correction later on. Maybe I will have time to show you this too, but for now we are happy with that. Okay, so let's deal with our Plexus shape. So before I start stylizing my shape, I want to create a camera, because the camera has quite an influence on the look of Plexus. So I will create a new layer and a new camera, and I will set it to 28mm, so it's a little bit of a wide angle camera, and it's enough to use a one-noded cam. Okay, now you see immediately that the point size is changed, and this has to do with the optics of the camera. And now I also want to create a new null object, and I will use this null object to control the position of my camera. So I will rename it to cam control. Make this 3D and parent the camera to the cam control. Select both layers, and just change the color so that you know what we're working with. I generally do this on my projects to keep an overview. Just, colorize your layers. Now what we are going to do is to deal with the look of our 3D layer. So first of all, I want to position it approximately. So maybe it's time to create a title right now. So let's create a new text layer by just selecting our text tool and clicking into our comp. And I will just write in abstract Plexus shape tutorial. Great, and I will just change this a bit, give it a little bit more of an interesting look. So let's turn this to 50, and oh, it's an tutorial. Well, whatever that is, let's correct it. It's a tutorial, still a tutorial. Plexus. Plexus is important, so we will just take the Nexa bold font. Actually, Nexa is the font that I also used for my promo. I think it's kind of a cool font for motion design. You can get it free on the internet, by the way. I will add the link also in the description. And now let's make our abstract a little bit bigger. It's 25. Let's set it to 35. Plexus shape, abstract Plexus shape tutorial. Great. And let's add another line of text here. And I will add by graphicInmotion.com to make a little bit of advertisement here, of course. So 25, so that it's not so big here. And let's just change the position of that, line it up with our tutorial, let's say, approximately. And now I will just select both of them and approximately eyeball them to the middle, something like that. Okay, so the title is a little bit big, but I don't care now for design that much. What I want to do now is I want to position my 3D object that it somehow lines up nicely with our title. So therefore I will just select my Plexus layer, and before I do that I will add some more elements here. So first of all, we need some lines. Plexus is about points and lines in most of the cases, and so we need lines. Therefore I just choose to add another renderer, and I will add a lines renderer. And now you see, well, the lines are really thick and they are covering up my points. So you definitely want to change the order here. And Plexus works from top to bottom. So whatever you put right on the bottom here will be rendered at last. And that's why now the points are on top of our lines. And that is exactly what we want. And now we'll change the settings of the lines to something like, well, thickness to something like 0.3. so that they are really, really thin. And I also want to change the color. So I have to disable my get colors from vertices, and I have to disable my get opacity from vertices. And I will change the color to some black or really black. And now I also want to change the maximum number of vertices, because I think 10 is a little bit too much and creates, in this case, it's not so bad, but if we split this up, we probably get a little bit too much out here. So I will just change it to, let's say 7. Or maybe even 8. I will have to come back here probably and change these values a bit, but for now I will leave it on 8, and now we will play with the maximum distance. And the maximum distance, we have to increase this a bit, I guess. Let's say I will use 150 for now. Okay, now let's add in some facets here. So I will go again to my add renderer and I will select facets. I hope that this is the right way how you pronounce this. Actually, I have no idea. But, well, it sounds like face and facets. Okay, and I also want to put these on top of the lines because I want them to render it first, and then the lines and then the points. And now I will enter my settings here, and again, get colors from vertices. I do not want that. I do not want to get the opacity from vertices, and I want to lower the opacity, the overall opacity on these. And I will take some kind of a nice dark green color, so something like that is quite good. And what I want to do now is now I want to first of all reposition this shape a little bit. So let's go to our OBJ object and let's enter our transform OBJ settings. And here you see you can scale it, you can rotate it, you can position it. And first of all, what I want to do, I want to rotate it, and I want to rotate it on the x-axis because it should point down something like that. That looks quite good. Maybe I will even rotate it a bit more, like not quite 180, but something like 170. And I will move it down a bit so that it somehow frames our title, and maybe even want to scale it down a bit. Oops, that was way too much. No, a little bit only. Let's say like that. 70% looks quite good. And now maybe I also want to rotate it on the y-axis so that we get a little bit more of depth here. So now you see, let's take it like that. Just minus 30 degrees on y. And now we reposition it a bit so that it fills up the whole screen again. And maybe I will also rotate it a little bit on the z-axis. And this looks quite cool actually. So yeah, let's give it a try just for now. Okay, so the points are still too big, so I will change the size of the points in my points renderer quickly to 1. 1 is quite small now. Let's say 1.4. 1.4 is too much. 1.2. Yeah, let's leave it like that for now. And what I want to do now is to add some more excitement to this shape and create, or we need a little bit more of an abstract look here. So we'll need to add an effector. And you see we have different effectors here. And what I want to use here is a noise effector. And if we increase the amplitude, then you will see that the noise effector will, affect our shape. And I want to increase this quite a bit. So let's say to start with, I will set this to 400. And you see immediately that the whole shape breaks apart completely and now looks kind of weird. And that's actually not what we want. We want to still, have a little bit of our basic shape visible. And I will just change the axes that the noise is applied to, because now it's applied to all 3 axes and really displaces our geometry quite a bit. So I wanted to only influence the y and z axis. And now it doesn't influence the x axis that much. And maybe it's still too much, the amplitude, but let's take a look at that. We can play around with the noise details. So let's change the noise on the y-axis a little bit to get a nice look. And maybe let's turn it back down. That's just eyeballing the look that you want. And for now, I say I'm satisfied with that. I just want to reduce the number of lines. It's way too much. So let's go into our lines renderer and let's set this to, let's see, 4. 4 is a little bit small value. 4, 5. Let's see, 5. Increase the length a bit. Well, that doesn't do anything. Okay, so we will stick with our 150, sorry. And maybe we'll set it to 6. 6 looks quite good. And now I want to enter my facets renderer. And I want to change the distance here. So to create a little bit more of an interesting look, you see, the more I increase it, the denser and the more obvious and visible the facets get. So for now, I will stay with 240 or 9 or 250, and maybe still reduce this a little bit. The opacity, sorry. Let's say to 20%. Let's take a look at what we got here. Yeah, it's not too bad. I think that my noise actually is a little bit too intense. So let's see when I just turn it down a bit, like 300. And now let's play around with this a little bit with these settings here. Don't know whether it's better to increase them or decrease them. Well, I want to have an abstract shape, so let's set it like that. Okay. What else do we want to do? Maybe our lines are not really, the length is probably not working, because I want them to get thinner actually. And yeah, you see, if I turn it down, if you take a look right here, I want them to get thinner over the distance. And this is what makes it look really thin and fine and cool. So let's set it to, let's say 90 here. And now what I want to do is I want to take a look to turn on the depth of field on my camera, just to take a look what an effect this will have on my shape. So let's go into our camera settings. Let's press AA and let's turn on the depth of field. And you see by default nothing is happening because we have to turn on the depth of field on the Plexus layer. So let's move down to our renderer here and let's select depth of field. And I will say I want to have the camera settings here, and you see immediately something is happening. But you also see, well, only the points and the lines get blurred, but not the shapes, or not the facets, I should say. And this is because of the kind of depth of field that we use here, and it's adaptive, so it means no polygons. And we do not want that. Actually, we need the polygons right here. So I have to change that to the HQ sampling, and this only works with OpenGL. So you probably need to have a special graphics card, sorry, the GPU. So let's select GPU accelerated rendering, and immediately we see, okay, this is exactly what we want. Now it has depth and looks, yeah, quite good. So what else do we want to do now? Well, I think in this case I will just scale down my text a little bit. So I will select both of them, and I will choose a null object, sorry, and I will turn this into a 3D layer, and I will parent my text to this and call it title control, just to make it easier to position and scale these together. And just scale it a bit and move it a bit over, because I do not want it to interact that much with our blurred, the blurred ones here, the blurred region here, because then it looks a little bit strange and a little bit destroys a little bit the 3D look. So let's put it right here. Maybe right here. Scale it up a bit. Oops, was the wrong layer. So let's select the title control again. And yeah, for now I will say that's okay. It's not quite a good composition, but I will not waste too much time on this now. So, you know, this is more or less exactly the look that I used. And the only thing that you have to do now is to create a camera movement. And therefore, well, that's not so difficult. So we can now just, oh, well, I forgot something, sorry. Of course, we need to create our build-up animation on this shape. That was one thing I wanted to show you. So how can you do that? So again, let's enter our Plexus layer, and let's set our time marker to about 3 seconds. So let's say this will be the time when everything should be visible. And you can do that in a few different ways. The first possibility that you have is you could just animate the distances. So let's go into the facets, because that's very obvious if I change that. And if I change the maximum distance here from 250 and I turn it down, then you see, of course, this will get invisible. And if I do this with all others, so like the lines, then of course this builds up. And this is quite nice, and I will definitely use this later on. But first of all, I also want the shape to come together somehow. And I can do this in several different ways. One possibility, for example, is to use the scaling of the OBJ, and therefore I have to disable the uniform scale, and this will distort my OBJ for the moment, because now I have the 70% scale only on my y-axis, but actually I want to have it on all my axes. So let's set it to 70% all over, so now it's exactly the same again. And now what we can do to add some depth here is we can change the scaling of the X, and you see now, well, okay, this changes the look quite a bit. So maybe we leave it in this case to 70%. And some shapes I increased the C scale, but I will not do it right now. And what else can we do? Just maybe rotate this back a little bit so that it's not so much rotation to -15. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit better in this case. And now I want to scale the X value. And if I do that, you will see what's happening. So this will tear apart our shape. And this is one way you could do that. Let's just scale them like that and scale them like that, and then just let them come together and animate these values. But there is another way how you can do this. Well, we're at 70 and at 70% too. You could also use a container object. So if we use a container object, I will show you this quickly, add effector and add a container. And if you choose a container, well, it does not do anything in the standard settings, because you have to specify the container type. And you can use a sphere, you can use a cube or an instance. And I will use a sphere for now. And you see immediately, well, now we have a very strange limited sphere, or the vertices are limited to a sphere. And I do not want this effect. I want to have it, another effect. So I will increase the container sphere radius until our shape is looking, well, not distorted anymore, so that the container has no influence on my shape. But what I can do now, I can now go into the transform settings of the container and uncheck the uniform scale. And you see that this has exactly the same effect when I'm scaling the OBJ. So this is another way you could approach this. And this is what I will use. I use this technique. So let's say I want to animate this from 1 second to 3 seconds. So I will set a keyframe on the x-axis on the 3 seconds time mark, and then I will move back to the 1 second time mark, and I will set it to about 350 or 400. Let's say 375 for now. And now I want to also animate a little bit. I want to animate the y value a bit. So let's go back to our keyframe and set a keyframe on the y-axis and go back and set this to something a little bit, not too much here, just 150. Okay, so now you see we do not see the facets anymore in the beginning, and then they build up over time. And now I want to do the same with my lines, and I can do this by animating the maximum distance. So let's move to our lines renderer and change the maximum distance. So I will move to my 3 seconds marker to my next keyframe. So I just press K on your keyboard, that moves to the next keyframe, and the J key moves to the previous keyframe. And I will set a keyframe for the maximum distance of 90. And I go back to my 1 second marker, and then I will decrease this, and let's set it down to 0 so that all lines are invisible now. And now, of course, I want to get rid of my points, and I just have to enter my points renderer. And in the points renderer, I can just check the draw only connected points option. And if I check this, you will see now all points are gone because no lines are drawn, so no points are connected. And if I now just reveal all keyframes, you will see that over time, at first we get some of the facets back, then we will get some of the lines somehow, and then the points will be visible or will get visible over time. And maybe I will do one more thing. I will easy ease all these keyframes. So select them, press right and go to keyframe assistance and easy in. So let's take a look here. And now we see in the beginning there are still some of the facets visible. So I have to animate the distance of these values too. So let's enter our facets renderer and set a keyframe at 3 seconds, move back to 1 second, and just decrease this until all our facets are gone. I will just decrease it to about, let's say 25 or something, not sure. Now let's take a look how this builds up. Actually now it builds up too slow, so I will increase this value to 60 because I want them to be visible from the beginning, and this is too low too maybe, so I will go back and put in something like 75. Let's take a look what this does. And yeah, I think this is quite good. So I will set them to easy ease 2. And let's take a look what this does. And this looks quite cool. Okay. And now we will create a short camera movement. So let's go to 3 seconds. And I want to set a keyframe on my cam control layer on the position value, because at 3 seconds we want to be actually exactly at this position. Now I will go back 3 seconds and I will just oh, I forgot one thing, sorry. We have of course to turn our text layers into 3D. So now the camera will have an influence on them too. Okay, now let's just move back something like -1500 is a good value. And maybe we'll move down a bit here too, so like that. And now you see that when we are approaching our title, the 3D shape is coming together, and that looks quite cool. And you also see that in the beginning here we have some rests visible, but well, actually it doesn't disturb me. If it disturbs you, you could also just collapse this layer so that it starts with the animation. Now it pops up a little bit. Well, in my case, I will just leave it because it really doesn't disturb me. So let's do it like that. And now you see our shape is forming, coming together. And now let's set another keyframe and about 6 seconds for our camera. And let's put this to plus 1500. And maybe, I don't know, let's see how we are traveling through this now. Maybe we want to travel. We'll put the camera a little bit more down. So let's try it out, something like this. Now we fly through our title here. It's not too bad. Okay, and now of course you could start to increase the quality or the camera path and yeah, make this really smooth. So just to show you what I did here to get these smooth camera movements, I activated the graph editor and entered the graph editor. And first of all, I want to separate all dimensions because then I can control them separately, and that's quite important. Then I choose all the start keyframes and set them to ease out so that I have a smooth start. And in my case now I will set ease in to the end keyframes because my animation actually is ending here. And I want to add what it's called. It's called Auto Bezier. Yeah, Auto Bezier to my middle keyframes. And now we should have a continuous camera movement and it's not stopping. I could also now play around with these values a bit. So let's check that out. I can right click on my keyframe on the Z-axis and select keyframe velocity. And now we see we have a velocity of 500 pixels and we have an influence about, well, 60%. I do not want to go into this too much details because it's, yeah, you could make an own tutorial about keyframe velocity, but actually this is controlling the angle of our handles here and the length of our handles. So I will show you this quickly. If I increase the influence, for example, let's set it to 50 so that we can see it. And if I press OK and take a look at the handles now, you will see that they will get much longer. So the influence is much bigger now. So you can control your graphs like that quite good because you can set the same values to all. In this case, I think that 50 is a little bit too much. So I will reduce it and let's say we want to do 30%. And I also think that the velocity on this point is a little bit too much because I want the velocity to go down. So to slow down the camera movement and then speed up again after we are behind our text. So let's set this to 100 and 30%. And let's take a look how this looks now. And you see now we have this curve here. And this means that we will slow down. So our camera will speed up here. Now it will slow down, approach our text, and then it will accelerate through it again. And this is quite cool. So let's use that for now. And I have not much movement on the y-axis, a little bit. So maybe I will just do the same here. Keyframe velocity, set it to, oh, actually it is already set. Well, because I selected all of them. No, it's not possible. Let's take a look at that. Let's select it, keyframe velocity. Well, exactly. It's minus 100 because now we need negative value because the curve is moving in the opposite direction. And then I will set the influence to 30 and press OK. And now you see this is also way smoother now. So now let's take a look what this does. And now we're flying through this. And I will just create a quick RAM preview here to show you the movement. So now you see we have quite of a smooth movement and our shape is building up, but you probably realized that I forgot something because our shape is not moving and I also want this to move. So I go back to my Plexus layer And on the noise effector, I want to change or animate the evolution setting. So if you take a look and I change the evolution, then, well, the changes are quite dramatically and quite hard. So I want to animate this with a really, really slow changing value. And the best possibility to do that is to use the time expression. So I will just move out of our graph editor and I will select my noise, or I will Alt click the stopwatch. That's what I wanted to say. So Alt, hold down Alt and click on the stopwatch to add an expression. And now type in time. And instead of multiplying it with you do most of the time to get higher values, I will divide it. And in this case by 4, because this will create a value that is exactly, now you see it's animating very slowly. So on 1 second, it only changed for 0.3 degrees. And if you enter this value, you have a very smooth movement in your shape. And you could, of course, crank it up a little bit, depending on what you want. And to crank it up, you have to decrease the number in this case. So let's set it to divided by 2. And you see now it will move quite a bit faster. Okay, so let's create a new RAM preview just to finish this tutorial. And of course, you see in my promo, I also animated the title. I also animated the letters that they come together, but I will not do this now because I think that the tutorial is already quite long and I do not want to waste too much time here. I think that you got the basic concept behind my Plexus work. And one more thing just to wrap this up and just to end it. You see that we have kind of a problem with our depth of field because the text is not even affected and Plexus is blurred really heavily. And this is because the Plexus setting, the standard setting of the blur factor is too high in most of the cases. So reduce this to, let's say, 0.2 or maybe 0.4. And you can, of course, also increase the quality because then the depth of field will look way better, but of course it will increase the render times. So let's set the blur factor for now to 0.2, and I want to change the camera settings a little bit. So let's enter 8A, and I want to increase the aperture value because this will give us a narrower depth of field. So let's say to 25. I just wanted to influence my text here a little bit more. So this is still too low. Let's set it to 50. That will probably get quite intense, yeah. But again, let's go back to Plexus and then decrease this value further, 0.15. And now let's take a look how this looks. So if we approach this, it should get blurred and the text should get blurred too. And this is exactly what's happening now. And I think that this looks actually pretty cool because now in the beginning everything is blurred. I will just make this a little bit bigger. And now you see as we approach this, the text gets clear and we still have a little bit depth of field, but it's not so crazy like before. Okay, so well, this is it. I hope that you enjoy this tutorial. Again, I would be really glad if you visit my website and if you take a look at the other tutorials and maybe you find one of my templates useful, then I would be really glad if you support me like that. Thanks a lot for watching and I really hope to see you soon. Goodbye.